Let's take a look at another problem. In the next group of problems, we're again told to rationalize, which again means we don't want any square roots in our denominator. So if we look at problem A, we've got 3 over the square root of 3 plus 1. So this is a little different because I don't just have a square root of 3. I've got some other stuff on the denominator that's next to it. So don't write this down yet, but if we just tried the same trick that we did before, multiplying by the square root of 3, we'd have an issue. Because we'd have to multiply the square root of 3 times the square root of 3, which would kill that square root. But then the square root of 3 would also have to come back and get multiplied by the 1. And that would bring our square root of 3 right back and pop out of nowhere again. So it looks like it went away and then it comes right back. So that doesn't quite work. So what do we do if that doesn't work? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to try something else. We're going to do what's called multiplying by a conjugate. The conjugate means to take whatever you have on the denominator and just switch the sign in the middle. So because we have a plus in the middle, we're going to use a minus. So I'm just going to multiply by the square root of 3 minus 1. That's what's called our conjugate, just switching the sign. But just like before, if I do that to the bottom, I have to do the exact same thing. Can't change it at all to the top. Okay, so let's see what that does for me. Well, let's make sure that the denominator gets rid of any roots, because that was the goal of this. I don't even want to multiply out the top if the bottom doesn't even work out. So let's multiply out the bottom. So how do I multiply out the square root of 3 plus 1 times the square root of 3 minus 1? Well, it's not pretty. I have to take these two and I have to FOIL. No way around it. So square root of 3 times square root of 3 will give me 3. Square root of 3 times negative 1 will give me negative 1 square roots of 3. Keep going, I'm not done foiling. Next part of foiling is the 1 times the square root of 3, so that's a positive 1 square roots of 3. And a positive 1 times a negative 1 will give me a negative 1. Now what you'll notice is I have a positive 1 square roots of 3 and a negative 1 square roots of 3. One's positive, one's negative, so they'll just cancel out. But notice what's still left over. I still have left over a 3 and a minus 1. That doesn't cancel out completely. I still get a value. So I'm not going to get a 0 here. I'm not going to have the entire denominator disappear. I actually get something there. So what do I get here? When I add the 3 and the negative 1, I still have a denominator. It's just a positive 2. But that's okay. The denominators won't cancel out completely, but the roots will. That's what mattered, is that I have a denominator without any roots. They're gone. What's nice about the top is I can leave it as is. I've got a 3 times the square root of 3 minus 1. And the reason why I can leave it is it's already factored. If you wanted to, you could multiply out the 3, but you just don't need to. So that is my final answer. It's 3 times the square root of 3 minus 1 all over 2. And again, we're doing this because we want to get rid of the square roots out of the denominator. And when you've got more than one piece on the bottom, like we did in this one, you've got to multiply by what's called the conjugate. So when we had the square root of 3 plus 1, we used the conjugate, which is the opposite sign. We use the square root of 3 minus 1.